Hey folks, today we are talking about online whiteboards. These are collaborative tools you use during system design interviews, or if you have a teammate and you want to share a design. This is super useful because you can add text, you can add shapes, you can draw shapes, and so in this way you can collaborate with your team effectively. Today we'll talk about it, system design.
So we have been using it to create this series, but there are very common ones that I use. So we use Miro because we like it, but then this is not sponsored. There are many other ones which you will see very popularly used, like Excalidraw. There's also Figma and Canva that you might have used, which use similar concept, that there is online whiteboard. What does online mean? That we are able to see on the runtime that what we are doing, right? Like if I make a box, suppose I make a shape over here, and then I suppose write Gaurav Keerti. So Gaurav, are you able to edit this?
No, I can't. I'm seeing a gray box.
Correct. Versus I am able to undo and redo, right? So this is one interesting point. Like Gaurav is writing right now, but I am not able to do anything to this. I can't undo, I can't redo. So this is one way of handling this, but how different whiteboards handle it is different. Like for example, Excalidraw doesn't do this. It allows that both of us are able to change concurrently, right? So it changes from whiteboard to whiteboard at how you want to do it. So it is very important that we discuss the requirements and then we discuss that how we want our whiteboard to function.
Yeah, Excalidraw actually allows two people to update at the same time, and we'll get to how it manages that. Firstly, Keerti, I think you have already gone for the awesome requirements here. One of the things is we are able to draw shapes, and then we are able to add text. Okay, these two things are common. I also saw that we are able to format the text. I made some stuff bold, right? System, and so apart from this, I think you also reshaped or resized.
Correct.
The shapes. So there's a lot
also
of
the shapes can be either fixed, like the ones that we made, the rectangles, triangles and all, and then they can be arbitrary shapes as well. Like we can use the pen tool and we can draw anything, right?
Oh yes.
So that is also
stuff
there.
Like this, Okay. So the shapes can be arbitrary.
So they can be arbitrary or fixed. So we have to take care of draw, resize, update, as he has already written. And also shapes and text, both of them, right? So we should be able to draw, update, resize, text, everything, right?
Yeah, I think all of them are coming together. So draw, update, format, resize, all of this stuff you can have in shapes, regular shapes. So all of this is true for regular shapes, like you said, arbitrary shapes, and also for text, I think.
Correct.
Okay, so this is like one major requirement here that takes care of formatting, resizing the shapes, all of this stuff. Okay, the second thing, Keerti, you and I are working on this together. So I think they need to work on a feature where the bullets are fine. Keerti and Gaurav are working on this together. So collaborations.
Correct.
Collaborative board. So I mean, if you look at it from a technical point of view, concurrent updates. Okay,
yes,
or
exactly.
Apart from this, let's just look at what else we have here. We can export the board to a PNG. Okay.
In this draw update format, I guess you can also add move, because we can move the shapes, we can move the text, we can move things here and there.
Yes, that's absolutely true. So
if you add just text, you can move that, but like this within the box, if you have written that, now is that considered like a group together and we can move it? Now grouping is like a secondary requirement. I don't think it is a primary one for us, but just mentioning that here, if we have written within a rectangle, I guess those are grouped together and they will be moving together.
Yes. Grouping objects together, that's a really good point. I mean, if we take these two, together and I say we need to group this, is that possible in Miro?
I'm not sure.
Okay,
it is possible in Canva and all.
Are you editing the system design Charcha?
Okay, now I've moved away.
Okay, that now let's see if we can group them. Yeah, we can group these objects and we can move them around together.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. Let's see how we can manage that. Anything else that we have? We have undo and
another
redo.
thing that we have already demoed it, but I guess we have added it also, undo and redo. How we want to basically handle it depends. So there are multiple ways of handling it. We'll be discussing those.
Yeah, look at this. Connecting these shapes, like through an edge or something, that can also be done. Keerti, now you're avoiding my edit here.
Cool, moved.
So this is like maybe an interesting thing for Xcali Draw. No, Xcali Draw allows updates to happen together, but Miro doesn't. So that's interesting. Okay. The thing that we were talking about is connecting shapes through arrows or lines or whatever be the case. Okay. I don't think there is anything else that we have. I'm able to zoom in and zoom out, but I think we can ignore that.
When we combine connecting and moving, so Gaurav and I noticed that there's one very interesting difference between Miro and Xcali Draw, also how they handle it. Like in Miro, if you notice, Gaurav, if you can just show moving that. So here what happens is basically there are 2 points that are connected. And if I, okay, let me show. So if I move like this, those points.
You're able to move and I'm able to move at the same time.
Yep. But if you see, there are only points that are connected, right? And it is not like that these points are not going to move. Versus in Xcali Draw, what is going to happen is that point also might move. They are connecting the shape instead of connecting the points.
Okay, let me just show that also. So let's see what that looks like. Okay, like Keerti said, if you just hold this and move it around, the entire shape is connected. So I like this more. What about you?
I mean, it depends. If there are a lot of boxes, then, one might become annoying than others. So, depends.
Yeah, it might cut through something, But here you always have it in the same place. So, you have that luxury. Also, you can cut this out and, add a arrow here if you're really interested in.
Right. So, it depends on the requirements that you want. Right. So,
yeah.
Cool.
Okay. This is interesting. One thing also that we often do when we are editing the videos is we need to go back to our older documents. So storing the document is one thing, and so sometimes we might need some version history. So in that case, we can think of this.
Keerti, this is also there in Google Docs and all.
Yeah, it's a lot. But do you think we should, I don't know if we can take all of these here. Exporting, I think we can ignore because exporting the document to PNG is not really, I don't think it's important. So we can skip this part.
Also, 2 secondary requirements that I would just like to mention quickly. Then it depends, we might not discuss them in detail, but quickly mentioning. One is zoom in, zoom out, right? Which seems like more of a front end requirement, but still, how are we going to zoom in, zoom out of the shapes? The second thing is also it depends from whiteboard to whiteboard at how we want to design it, and how many shapes can we add, for how long can we access the whiteboard, and all of those things are there. So expiration time is another thing, but it is a second requirement. But maybe just to think how would you handle it, right? So that would really help us with storage as well.
Absolutely. I think, all of this is directing us to a particular file format which helps you zoom in, zoom out correctly, which can let you group objects together. So if there was a hierarchy in the file format, in that file, like I am thinking of HTML, where you have things in one paragraph, they all move together, that can help us. And version history, where if you just store the entire file, let's say yesterday's file is stored, and then today when we make changes, that file is also stored. So every half an hour, maybe a cron job runs and just stores files. All the changes are condensed into a single file. That can help. So all of this stuff seems to be dependent on how do we store the data? Like how do we store these shapes in our system? The text, the shapes, the colors, everything. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. connecting shapes through lines, this can be a challenge. Undo, redo will be a challenge. Concurrent updates. So if concurrent updates are just not allowed, like it's not allowed in Miro, then it seems easy. You don't have to manage it at all.
The
Excalibur,
one thing that we would have to handle in concurrent updates in a case like Miro would be that who is the owner of each object. So that is something that how would you store that? I'm just mentioning it.
Right. So, Keerti, what you're getting to, I think, is undo, redo.
No, even in concurrent updates, like if I am updating and then you update, then like who can update this, right? Yeah,
right,
who's the owner,
sense.
which is important for both concurrent updates and undo, redo.
Okay. So instead of concurrent updates in Miro, we have owner of an object. So if you're making changes, you have kind of locked that object. No one is making changes now. Okay.
Correct.
So concurrent updates, you can take locks. And in Excalibur, what we saw was that the last writer, they win. So if you make changes, Keerti, and I make changes, and if Keerti's changes reach the server later, her updates will go through. Gaurav's updates are thrown out.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think this part then is solved. This is, unlike Google Docs, it's not as complex as you would think. This is much simpler in these apps. Okay. In terms of drawing, updating, formatting, resizing, moving objects, Keerti, any ideas? How do we store these shapes, which can be arbitrary and sometimes text? Like what data format?
On the front end, like whenever we think about whiteboard, so there are two things that come into picture that most people discuss. One is Canvas and one is SVG. Now both have their own pros and cons. I wouldn't go like always use this or don't use this. But for this case, SVG seems like a better use case, and let me tell you why. So do you know what SVG stands for?
No. Support
scalable scalable vector graphics. So scalable also it answers our problem. No, even I did not know. Scalable answers our problem of zoom in, zoom out, right? So that is very helpful, because in Canvas, what happens is that if you scale in or scale out, it might get blurred or it might get destroyed, versus SVG is going to solve that problem for us. Moving and all that is also going to be very easy. Canvas is usually used when you want it to be very, very lightweight, but considering our cases, SVG does make more sense. What do you think?
Yeah, that sounds perfect. If you have these shapes converted into SVG, like they have those points, it's almost like a function. The SVG is able to store it more efficiently, these regular shapes. They tell you exactly the, unlike you mentioned, unlike how pixels need to be drawn.
Correct.
The SVG just says that this line is starting at this height and it's horizontal, and this is the rotation. So it really helps even in mobile. When you want to see a really small image, you don't have to send a lot of info. You're just sending the function.
Right.
Okay. So
SVG
really
basically is vector format, right? So internally it is basically mathematical equations and all by which we are putting, and it is based on XML. And versus Canvas is basically it is more associated with JavaScript, and it is majorly used when you have to do animations and all. So not so much for just this whiteboard.
Okay, so if we have to resize things, then we can just change the SVG size. It's easier. If you have to move it, so XY coordinates can be changed. If you want to update the color or change the rotation, that's also possible. Drawing an SVG image, drawing any arbitrary shape into SVG is also easier to do, because when you're dragging your cursor, you're basically going through a set of points, and that can be converted into a function. Okay, and the format is perfect because, like you mentioned, Keerti, you want to be able to zoom in and zoom out efficiently, and you want to group objects together. Again, this is a hierarchical format where you can group multiple SVG components together. And you have a version history also. So you just store maybe SVG files here. Okay.
Right. Okay. And also interestingly, like if you try to export PNG, PDF, they are usually much more bigger than SVG files. SVG files are actually smaller as well, which is better for us.
Yeah. So PNG, PDF. So from SVG, we'll just convert this to PDF. So I think we'll go for SVG. It seems ideal for us. It kind of solves these problems, or keeps most of the things in client, and on the server you are just storing newer versions of SVG files. Is there any concern that is it possible that the SVG file we are working with is too large?
I think we should check that how much is the usual size of the SVG files, right?
Yeah.
Let me do
Okay,
that.
let me try to export this as an image.
Export this, yes.
Okay. If I try to export it as a, I can only export it as a JPEG. I can't export it as a SVG. High resolution
In Canva
export is,
and all you can.
Okay, in Canva. Let's try that. Sorry. Cancel. Let's try Excalibur. Let's try to export this. Only select
SVG.
Oh, there's SVG. Okay. Yes, here it is. It's a really small document.
How much is it? You literally exported one arrow, Gaurav.
Yeah.
Can you add a few more?
No. I'll tell you something though. When it comes to SVG files, I have done this at Interview Ready when we are storing it on CloudFront and CDN. Hey, there's no way you'll go to an MB. It's going to be super hard unless you have a face of a person as a SVG. Then that is like okay. There's no, there's too many points to store. But yeah, we come back to this part where our concern of SVG files being too large to constantly send through the network over the network is not a real concern. So let's keep that aside. We have solved this large part.
Gaurav, since we are done with the major requirement of drawing, updating and all, can we talk about the high level system design and how it is actually going to communicate? Yeah.
Makes sense. Okay, so we have a person A and they're here making changes to a document, and there's a person B. Okay, now you have this doc. So they're sharing this doc, and at the end of the day, there has to be a server somewhere which is serving this doc. So we have this server, and these two users are connected to this server, which is then sending them the updated document.
My very favorite topic, that how is the communication going to happen between this A, B and the server, right?
Yeah.
Because we need real-time communication, and we also need to send from server to the client. So how is that going to happen? WebSockets, my favorite.
Yeah. I think that makes total sense. We are going to have WebSocket connections here.
Yeah. So basically A will be connected by a WebSocket duplex connection with server, and similarly B will also be connected by a WebSocket duplex connection with server. So as any of them make the changes, the server can basically tell the other one that, okay, these are the changes, right?
We'll use a WebSocket connection here. It's very similar to chat systems, don't you think, Keerti? You just need just send updates. Updates are being stored in a central place. It's like a channel, and then you're propagating these updates to the next person, who meanwhile might be sending you updates also. Okay.
Correct. So actually further detailing like that, how will A and B come to know that where is the collaborative engine or where is the server connected to, and we'll obviously need multiple servers, and then we'll need like a load balance and all of that. We have discussed very similar things in Snapchat video as well, so you can refer to that. We will add the link in the description.
Link in the description, guys. Okay.
Since we have talked about the WebSocket connections, and we already discussed that, okay, we're going to store in SVG. Should we also quickly discuss that how are we going to store the SVGs?
Okay. Yes, we can store the SVG as a like a HTML document. We can store it in the file system. So
like a blob storage as well, right? Like S3 or GCP or Azure.
Yes. Yeah, we can do that. We can actually keep the files in memory for a while, because active files are going to be less. So we keep everything in the server. Any file changes, we can keep it in the server's file system also. And then when we have to push the updates, maybe let's say every 5 minutes or 10 minutes, we push them all to a doc store. Doc store, I mean, you can have a key value database, a document database, or you can use distributed file store like S3, like you mentioned. S3 I think is perfect here. I would use S3. Yeah.
There's also one more approach that we could store the SVGs in document DBs like MongoDB or CouchDB, but then obviously
Yes.
query and all will be hard, but that's one more approach.
We could do that. You could also store it in a text search, like Elasticsearch, in which case you'll be able to search within the document. That's not a requirement. So, but I think I'm overthinking here. Maybe just a simple file store is also okay. If they have
Right.
search capabilities, like you're searching for, let's say, in this image we have WebSocket written. So if Miro says that you'll be able to search within images, it makes a lot of sense. Or you want to search for this kind of thing, then it makes sense. Otherwise, the metadata of the file, which is just the title of the file and maybe a few other things, the size of the file, that can also help you. The last timestamp, update timestamp, those things can help. But
A couple of
inside the
things
document,
over
search is not
here.
necessary.
One thing that, when we store it in document DB, we could store it as JSON, which is actually very common at SVG is converted to JSON and stored. That is one thing. And another thing that as you were talking about, metadata, just quickly mentioning that we talked about, who is the owner updates we mentioned, right? Now, do we consider that as metadata for this, or like how are we going to store that also is important, right?
Yeah,
That
I
who
am
is
not
the
sure
owner for which shape.
for which object.
Yeah.
I think when you have this kind of thing, like if I'm working on this, you must be seeing you must be seeing server not being editable. What could happen is maybe in the SVG file itself, if I can mention that as a meta parameter in that, server object that Gaurav is working on it. So once the work is done, when Gaurav says, okay, I am moving my cursor out and the server gets to know, it releases the lock. There's no lock releasing actually. It's just that Keerti then sees that has opened up. So all of this can be managed on the client side also. We can do it that
But
way.
we will need server intervention, like because we'll need that, okay, this user ID is currently using, so basically block it. The others should not be able to use it.
No, I'm
And
thinking.
then unblock
So for example, you have this server object. Surely there's some SVG which is some line in the SVG which is defining this server object. It's a rectangle. It's got curved edges and it's got server written inside it. Gaurav is currently working on it. So the ID of this object can be, let's say, 123, and then currently working on equal to Gaurav. So if currently working on is not equal to Keerti, Keerti can't work on it. And if currently working on is blank, then Keerti can pick it up. So in that way, we can avoid making locks on the server also. We just propagate changes through WebSockets to each of the users.
That is a good approach. The
Yeah.
only thing that I am thinking about is that we are essentially making too many changes to the SVG, which should be okay, I think, which is fine.
Yeah. At the end of the day, we have to propagate that information somehow. We can keep it within the SVG itself. Otherwise, the client has to have the. It has to render this anyway. So
Correct.
okay.
Right.
Oh, actually, you can keep it. Yeah, maybe separately. So it kind of depends on the application, I would say.
Yeah, that's what the pros and cons I was thinking about that.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Yeah.
Okay, we have this part, and then now if you are not the owner, then you can't make concurrent updates. Okay, so let's keep this part aside. Now let's get to undo and redo. In undo and redo, this is something that we try to do. I try to undo objects which I have changed and it works. But if I try to undo objects which Keerti has changed last, in fact, Keerti, would you like to change the server name to something else, like anything? Okay. Now, if I try to press Ctrl Z, everything else changes, but the server doesn't move an inch because that is an object that Keerti last owned.
So basically, that I am the owner, and now I'm going to press Command Z, and I'm able to undo.
Yeah, you are able to undo, but I'm still not able to undo the server because that object is now owned by you.
Correct. Versus if you try writing it now, I will not be able to undo. So basically, who is the owner? That is what we're talking about.
Yeah. So server 3, I can undo it. What this brings, this is how Miro is handling it. Excalidraw may handle it differently, but this is a simple way to handle things. Every object has a person who's currently working on it, and the person who last worked on it becomes the owner.
Correct.
So if you press Control Z enough times and you are the object owner, then then those changes are noted. Otherwise, those changes are not noted. So
Yep.
if I press Control Z, you can see that B just got unbold. Many things changed because all of these objects I am the owner of. When Keerti had made server 2, I was not able to touch server 2. So all the changes which affect objects that I own are noted. Everything else is ignored.
Correct.
Yeah. And the best part about this, undo and redo is all on the client side. Nothing goes to the server. Whenever you are making any changes, like an undo is basically a change operation. So this might be SVG, which is on the stack of the browser. So the latest change is on the top of the stack. And then if you press undo, you go back to the older SVG files. And if you redo, then you go back to the higher level of the stack. If you make any changes, then you just replace the stack and the pointers break.
Very interesting point that you mentioned browser. So we are basically keeping this on the browser side itself.
Yeah, we can keep all our changes in the browser. If the SVG files are small, then we can store it in the local store itself.
Guys, if you must have noticed that once you close an online whiteboard and then you reopen, you basically cannot undo redo, right? Because now because you had saved it on browser, now that's gone. If you reopen it, like you basically cannot undo it. Happens with me a lot of times. I basically, I'm working on something and then I end up closing it by mistake and now it's gone. I can't undo. Basically, that's how it works.
Sometimes you lose network connection, you log in from some other phone and then you're like, oh.
Yeah.
But
Now
Google, you can't. But I think Google Docs gives you much more fine control. Also, version history in Google Docs is like quite good.
Amazing.
But
yeah.
The concurrent updates are also pretty killer. But that's not a problem here. Connecting shapes through arrows and lines. This is the last thing we'll be looking into. You can see that these two shapes are connected. I don't really know how this is happening. In Excalidraw, I did see they have some metadata which says that, this arrow object actually has metadata of I'm connecting to server on the left side and I'm connecting to B on the right side. So there is that metadata to and from. And then the object information is there, like how thick is this arrow, is there a line, start line, and all of that stuff I think is SVG. But
as we had discussed, it was like on the shape basis. Here it is basically point basis. So it is basically, it is not even trying to find like the shortest distance or anything like that, right? Just trying to connect it somehow with minimum changes. Like even if you go like this, versus over there, I think it was somehow also trying to find the shortest distance between the two shapes, right?
Yes, like this one. Yeah. What's probably happening here is it has this SVG file and then it has a graph of what nodes are connected to what other nodes through edges. So I think there's an adjacency list that Excalidraw stores. It must be the same for Miro. So in that adjacency list, each edge defines whether you write something here. So let's say connected. Okay, and I pick this and I do this. So it gives the metadata of what text exists in this edge, where is the to, where is the from, the thickness of the line, the color of the line, all of that stuff is in this edge. So this is a graph that is being stored. Apart from the SVG, I think we also need to store a graph then.
Yeah.
Okay, now if you press Ctrl Z, then that graph also changes. Okay, I'm wondering how this happens. Maybe again a set of operations that...
I think we are overcomplicating by adding a graph, like not really necessary.
There has to be, right? Because without a graph, how do you know there's a to and a from? So maybe every change in the graph also reflects in the SVG. If you press Ctrl Z, the graph and the SVG both change. And you undo operations. But how do you undo the graph operations?
Gaurav, if you really store as graphs, like right now we do have connections, but then it is also possible that we just keep drawing a lot of boxes and then there are basically they are not connected. Basically, a lot of disconnected components of the graph, right?
Yes.
So
yes.
how, like, it really depends on how frequent is it that it is always going to be a connected structure, which is
No, it has to be connected. I think it must be connected. There's no other way. But I'm
maybe
sure
they
it
are
is connected.
storing this arrow when they draw the arrow. Maybe instead of storing the entire graph, maybe this arrow itself has that to and from, right? And then when
Yes.
you move the arrow, like, then you are moving accordingly. That this is the to and this is the from.
When you're moving two objects. Acha. So
That
if you're moving the arrow or the objects, then they are related to each other.
correct. So suppose in this one itself, okay, I'm not connected to this Excali draw. Just draw 3-4 more boxes
Okay,
and
let's
try
do it here.
moving one of them.
Would you prefer this?
Okay,
There's
cool.
3 of these moving, yeah.
So now, right. So basically now all of the arrows need to move.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Maybe graph one is one case. Maybe another one is that what I'm saying ki for each arrow and then they say. What do you think?
One thing we can do when you're, like, if you really want to know how it's working in the real world, is just look at this.
Inspect.
Yeah, inspect element never fails. You can, what is this, bulk? What could it be? Payload? No.
It is moving bulk, like 3 things it is moving. Is that bulk?
Oh, okay. Let me clear and let me just take this and shake it a bit. Import. Okay. User notification import. This must be it, right? Yeah, it's got client and Miro client and version. Transaction ID batch. What is this stuff?
It is sending to it in patches that these are the changes that you need to make. Can you see more?
Yeah, user notification, I don't see that. Events, import.
Oh, did you see events?
Which one? A user notification?
So
No,
they're
it's
using,
blank.
oh, it is within, okay. I thought SSE or something.
No, yeah, even it looks interesting. I think it is something to do with import, and you have this batch, and then you have the page. Okay, you have properties, you have the widgets. Yeah, this must be it. Line thickness, it's right here. Line
Right.
trajectory.
Okay,
Line
line
type.
trajectory. So they are changing. Okay, can you see if there's another one?
They have all
like
this stuff
line-
here. But are they mentioning everything else? They have this. I think
I
they're
think they're
sending
deciding
the
the
entire.
line. Yeah, there's like updating the trajectory and everything. They're forming it on the front end, sending it to the like B front end.
Possibly. Look, how many are here? 7 objects, right? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think we have 7 objects too. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There must be a 6, 7 somewhere.
Do you? Okay. Can you
The reason
open
I'm
the
saying this
new
is because
import?
they are.
Can you open
This
the new
one?
import, the latest one?
Okay.
Do all of
Yeah.
them have 7?
No, it's just 0.
I think it is the number of updates.
Possibly. Yes.
And
Widgets
let's
total by
not
max
make
type
any
4.
change and see key. Is there any other request that's going to go in sometime?
Yeah, there are 3 updates now. No changes are going through. It
What is
seems
collect?
like connect.
Collect.
Collect is doing nothing. It doesn't seem to have any sense. Did you make any change just now?
No, I did not.
Okay, it seems to be periodically sending also.
Correct. That's what I was saying.
Uh-huh.
Maybe that will also help with versioning, right? That's But what I had for versioning would be in a few minutes or something. This is very frequent.
Yes. No, I think frequency is good because if you have every few seconds, users don't lose their changes. This is interesting. If we had to do it our way and we needed to have a graph, I mean, you can store two types of data. One is the SVG itself and one is the graph. Whenever a person makes changes to the graph, like they grab something and they move it down, we can render the SVG, the new SVG, because you have moved from one position to another. And at the same time, yeah, that's all that there would be. So if I would press Control Z, so I would go back here. That's fine. This doesn't change anything. If I delete an edge, then I would also need to delete it from a graph. If I change the direction of an edge, then I would also need to change the direction in the graph. Okay, it would be a little complex, but I think it can be done. If you have any metadata in that edge also, that also, whether you add, delete or update, it can be added, deleted or updated in the graph. And those operations, each of those operations would need an undo. So yeah, that would be one way in which you can connect shapes, not through SVG, but through a additional data structure of graph.
Yep.
What do you think, Keerti? Do you think it makes sense, or am I?
It does. It does.
complicated?
I mean, it really depends on the requirements and all, but this does make sense. Awesome. I guess we have covered all our requirements and we have discussed everything in quite detail. This was amazing, guys, and we are having a lot of fun creating this series, and we hope you are as well. If you have any further questions or if you would like to suggest any other topics that you would like us to cover, please do let us know in the comments, and do let us know how you're finding the series. See you next time.
Bye.